You're listening to Conversations Ignite.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today I'm joined by Kim Keane. She is a certified life coach, among many other things. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to have you on today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Can you give everybody, kind of let everyone know what a life coach is and kind of what you do?
Yeah, sure. So there are, I'll say, different iterations of what a life coach does. But basically, the way that I approach it is I help people move forward with a goal that they'd like to accomplish or an obstacle that they would like to break free from. And really doing it from a place where you get to the root cause of what's holding you back from getting over the obstacle or preventing you from achieving your goal, and then really aligning the mindset and the strategies that we use, so that way they feel doable and they don't feel like something that you'll do for a couple of days and then think like, oh, this feels uncomfortable or it's too hard, I'm not doing this anymore, to get you that long lasting result that you're looking for.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So it's not always just about having to come to you for problems or something. It can be like personal growth also.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of times people say to me, well, what's the difference between what you do and therapy? And so like from that perspective, we don't really, yes, we talk about the problems that you're having, but we go a little bit deeper without re-traumatizing ourselves from whatever the problem is. And basically I use the puzzle pieces of your life or the situation, and I help you put those puzzle pieces together in a way that feels aligned for you to break free from whatever it is that's holding you back. So yes, we do some talking, but we don't tell the same stories over and over and over again. Or it's not really like, tell me about that time when, and how did that make you feel when? Because going through it the first time was bad enough. So we don't want to torture ourselves again, reliving it over and over.
Now, you also are certified in a couple other areas.
Yes. So I am a Reiki master, and then I also am an angel healer. So, like the fancy title of that is like basically I can teach other people how to do angel healing, and then also a sound healer and an EFT practitioner.
What is you said Reiki master?
Reiki, yeah. So Reiki is a form of energy work. It's a type of hands-on healing. And so angel healing is also energy work and hands-on healing. And the way that they differ, I'll say, is that Reiki is more of like a universal energy, where angel healing actually uses the energy from the archangels to help with the healing, with the energy work. So different hand placements, but both are energy work modalities.
Now, do you use both of those also in like your life coaching sessions or when you're with clients?
Yes. So more people are, I'll say, open to trying the Reiki because it's a little bit more mainstream. It seems like a little bit more tangible because most people think like, yeah, right, you can't use angel energy. What are you talking about? Um, but yeah, so really the goal of the Reiki or the angel healing is to help with the energetic piece of the puzzle. So helping to clear out any old energetic blocks. Reiki really focuses on the chakras, which are energy centers in your body. So there are 7 main chakras. And so Reiki energy helps to balance out those chakras because sometimes they can be blocked from past experiences or, for instance, like if you are, sometimes they can also be overactive. So like someone who talks and has no filter and they just say whatever is on their mind, whether it's rude or polite or whatever, sometimes their throat chakra is overactive. And so they need help balancing that. So when they know it's an okay time to speak and when it's not an okay time to chat.
Interesting. Okay, neat. I personally have never heard of that before, so that's something cool and neat that I've learned.
Yeah.
Now, how did you get into life coaching and all these different things?
So the long story short is that I left my teaching career in 2014 from burnout, and I was really struggling with the loss of that teacher identity because that was such a huge piece of who I was. I was a kindergarten teacher. And that was like a lot of my how I saw myself. And then when that faded away, then I felt lost, and I was really struggling with becoming a stay-at-home mom and not having my teacher identity to hold on to. And so I went to therapy thinking that she was going to say, "Oh, Kim, three easy, it's an identity crisis, and here are the three easy ways to fix it." And it was so not that. So a lot of childhood trauma was, brought to the surface, and domestic violence trauma was rehashed, and all of these things that I had really kind of said, they're not really impacting me anymore. We're just going to stuff those down and pretend like they didn't happen. And she was really good at giving me labels, but then not really giving me tools to work through the labels of codependency and anxiety and childhood emotional neglect. And so I didn't want to take the medication, which is what her biggest suggestion was, like, just take the meds and it will make everything all better. And the gift was that she did say you should try yoga and meditation. And when I got into yoga and meditation, that opens really my realm of life to holistic ways to heal. And so as I was using those holistic modalities and seeing the result and having them help, then I was like, oh my gosh, I have to be able to do this for other people and be able to help them in this way too. So that's sort of how the journey progressed from me being the client to being the practitioner.
Okay. That's very cool that you kind of went through some of it and I guess really wanted to help other people.
Yeah. So because I just felt like what I was going through was horrible, and I really suffered alone in silence because I didn't want anyone to know that I was suffering, or that I was, feeling mentally unstable, or that I was, labeled as codependent or anxious or any of those things. So had I been more willing and open to share when I was actually in the thick of the struggle, it would have probably helped make the journey a bit easier. But I was so worried of what people were going to think of me or say about me that I did not want anyone to know. So that's why I feel like it's so super important to be the support person for someone's journey, because I didn't really feel like I had that. And if I did, I feel like the journey would have been maybe less painful, but definitely less of like the ups and downs, and more manageable.
Now, when is that a common issue with a lot of other people also?
I think it depends. I feel like depending on what the struggle is, people, if it's like something kind of mainstream like anxiety, that's a huge buzzword. I feel like people are okay to say like, oh yeah, I have anxiety. But if it's something like, and even depression, even though that's like something that can be maybe seen as like a little bit of a deeper struggle, I feel like if someone has a buzzword to hang on to, they're more inclined to share because they feel like it's more understood, or people are going to be able to connect to them more easily. But when I was going through the thick of the struggle, I had never heard the word codependent before. And so I was like, I'm the only one who's codependent, and I don't want anyone else to know. So I feel like if people feel like it's going to give them a common ground, I feel like they're more open to share. But if there's any possibility where someone feels like they're going to be judged or criticized, then they're going to keep that under wraps because they don't want to have that vulnerability of, sort of being discovered for whatever it is that they're struggling with.
Just in case anybody doesn't know that's listening right now, can you kind of explain what codependent is?
Yeah. So the easiest way that I can explain it, the way that my therapist explained it to me, was that you basically take on other people's emotions. And I would say that's probably more the case of if you're an empath, you'll take on other people's emotions, which yes, I am an empath. But I feel like when you're being codependent, you're taking on other people's emotions and you're prioritizing them over your own. So you're basically sacrificing your own well-being at the expense of other people to make sure that their emotional needs are being met.
So it sounds like you've really embraced kind of like mind and body spirit connections.
Yes.
How can someone begin to kind of understand and connect those kind of aspects to themselves and really start to kind of foster true healing?
Yeah, so the way that I started was actually with yoga and meditation. I think a lot of times what we do is we try to just take the mind approach to things and we try to think our way out of the problems, or we analyze things to the point of no return where you can't analyze them anymore. There's nothing left to analyze and you don't get any closer to a result. But when you can actually tap into the mind and the body and reconnect them so that you can connect with your spirit or your soul, I think that's where the magic happens. And so a lot of times we're not able to have that mind, body, spirit connection because we are living in survival mode and our nervous systems are tapped to the max. And so when we can actually calm our nervous system, it allows us to foster that connection. So for me, the way that felt the easiest at the time, because when I first started on this journey, I like you, I didn't know what Reiki was. I didn't know what crystals were. I didn't know about anything holistic. I didn't even really know what meditation was. So starting with meditation, I will say that was like, that felt like a safe, easy way in. And then going to yoga too, because all I had to do was show up with my yoga mat and listen to what the yoga instructor said. And then I would get snippets of information there. So like, learning how to focus on your breath as you move through the pose and letting go of what other people are doing on their mats and just focused on what you're doing on your own mat helps to reconnect the mind and the body, because when you're not worried about what's going on around you and you're only worried about what's going on in your own rectangle, it allows you to reconnect with your body. Notice what sensations you're feeling in your body, noticing what, maybe the anxiety actually feels like, or maybe sometimes we mistake anxiety for excitement, but it gives us the opportunity to discern the difference between the two. So that was really how I started. It was just meditation and it was yoga. I was going to yoga one day a week, and then I was meditating inconsistently whenever I felt like I had time to do it. And I just started with the Calm app, honestly. And I just did their little 7-day series that they had that was like introducing you to meditation. And then they also have a 21-day series. And this is I don't get an affiliate. There's no affiliate link here for the Calm app, but that was how I started, was with their 7-day series and then their 21-day series. And then it started to feel more natural to do it. And now I've been meditating every day for over 5 years. So it's like, I'm not going to say addictive, but like once you start to do it and you see how much better you feel, then you feel like you want to do it and you make the time and the space to actually do it.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, how do you kind of start to learn how to do meditation? And the app sounds really cool. Is there any other ways that you can kind of learn?
Oh yeah. So there are, so the Calm app you do have to pay for after you get past the 7 days, I think, but it's very inexpensive. But there are many other free options that you can do. So you can find meditations on YouTube. There's an app called Insight Timer, which has a vast library of meditations, and most of those meditations are free. So I would say those are the easiest ways to find a meditation if you're new. Just Googling yoga, or listen to me, yoga, meditation, Googling meditation for beginners. And there's plenty of things to do, but a lot of people feel like meditation, their biggest thing that stops them from trying is they're like, oh, I can't turn my brain off. Well, you're not supposed to turn your brain off. That's not what meditation is. It's just acknowledging your thought and letting it pass without judgment. So a lot of times I just say to someone that wants to start meditating, but they feel intimidated to try it, to literally just set the timer on your phone for 2 minutes, pick a space where you're not going to be disturbed or interrupted, and literally just set your timer for 2 minutes on your phone and just feel your breath, inhaling and exhaling, and just focus on the inhale and the exhale. And if a thought comes, just, acknowledge it. So like a lot of times when you're meditating and you have nothing else to focus on, you're like, oh my gosh, like my head is itching. So then you just not like, yes, there's an itch, and let it pass. And then you might notice like, oh, my stomach growled. Oh, yep, stomach growled, acknowledge it and let it pass. So like just getting into the practice of acknowledging what's coming forward, but doing it without judging it. So, without being like, oh my God, I can't believe my stomach's growling and I'm trying to meditate. like that defeats the purpose of meditation. So it's really about just getting into the practice of acknowledging what's coming up, breathing into it and letting it pass.
So it sounds like right when you first start out, even trying meditation, um, it doesn't sound like you have to be perfect at first, but it sounds like as you go, you kind of learn and get better and better with time at it.
Yes. And I will say, for all the years of consistency that I've been meditating, I'm still not good at it. Like my mind still races. So I would say that's the other hang up is like, there's this preconceived notion that people who meditate, there's like this perfect way to do it and they can get into this place of just pure Zen. And yes, there are people who can do that, but I would say that's probably not like the mainstream general population of people who meditate. So I still have monkey brain where my mind is racing a million miles an hour. I still sometimes, have a thought comes up and I'm judging it as I'm meditating. And then I have to flip the switch and be like, oh no, back to focusing on your breath. So I would say there's no perfection in meditation. It's just actually being willing to show up for yourself and hold that space is the beauty of meditation.
I assume same thing, same kind of practice with yoga. It all comes with time.
Yes, absolutely. I don't practice yoga as consistently as I did in the past. But I can tell you that, there are poses that for the life of me, I cannot do, even with like a bolster or a block or a strap. I'm like, nope, body doesn't move that way. So I do the best expression of the pose that I can. And there are times where, like I'm super embarrassed because, like I said, everyone around me is doing a better variation of the pose than I am. But, at that point, you just kind of laugh it off and be like, this is it. Here I am. This is as good as it gets. And so it's really about showing up and giving yourself the experience of being on your mat and reconnecting with your body and just taking that time. And so it's okay if you're not doing a perfect expression of the pose. Sometimes I hit the poses better than other times. And so it's really just like an ebb and a flow.
Now, I assume that over time you've worked with people that have different kinds of traumas. How do you support your clients in addressing like past issues while also ensuring that they stay present and grounded during their healing journey?
Yeah, so there are many different ways to approach that. And and the first thing is that, when I'm working with a client, I don't take them, if they're talking about a trauma, we don't go down to the nitty gritty of the detail. Like, I don't want to know all like what time and who and what you were wearing and the car that you were riding in. Like, I don't want to know all of that. And so really it's about getting to, whatever the core of the problem is. So really it's about figuring out the patterns that they're running around that situation. So for instance, one of my clients, that I was working with, she really kind of she sacrifices herself and she takes more than what she should from people. So like one instance that she shared was that when she was working in an office, she and one of her coworkers' desks faced each other, and the coworker started encroaching on her desk, like had her teapot there with her pot plate and her tea bags and her sugar, all of these things on my client's desk. And my client never said anything about it. She just let it happen. And the lady just kept taking more and more space. And that was because that was what she learned in childhood, was to take more and sacrifice more than what she should at the expense of her happiness to make sure that everybody else was happy. And so working through that, giving her things to do to manage when she's feeling triggered. So like tapping, EFT tapping, a sequence that she can do with me when we're working together, but also that she can use when she's alone. Some journaling prompts, just really things that feel like they're going to be what's right for her in that moment. I'm not like, in that moment, it was like affirmations weren't going to cut it. So like I knew we're not going with affirmations in this situation because that wasn't going to be enough to get her through. But where tapping was because she could calm the nervous system and start working on reframing the way that she saw those situations and the way that she felt about herself for being in those situations.
Now, you had mentioned NFT tapping. Can you explain what that is?
Oh, it's actually EFT, and it stands for emotional freedom technique. So the beauty of EFT tapping is that it is a combination of energy work, and it's also a combination of neuro-linguistic programming. So there is a tapping sequence that you follow, and so you start by karate chopping on the side of the hand, and I give you what's called a setup statement, and there are three of them. And so after we do the setup statements, then I craft additional statements, and you tap with each additional statement in between the eyebrows to the outer eye to the under eye, under the nose to the chin to the collarbone, under the arm, and then on the top of the head. So as you're tapping on these places, it's like acupressure and their meridian points. So it's going to help move out the energy, but the language reframes are going to help you reprogram the way that you're thinking and talking about the situation.
Oh, interesting. Um, that's another thing that I've heard of it, but I've never really understood it. So interesting.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So it sounds like in your work, it kind of so life coaching and therapy kind of sound the same, but I kind of see where the difference is, where you don't necessarily dig as deep into the issues. You kind of figure out what the issues are, but you don't push it.
Yeah. So there are a lot of different variations of therapy. Like there's cognitive behavioral therapy. That's the first one that comes to mind. And then there's like your traditional talk therapy. And so um, they're different in that like coaching and your traditional talk therapy are different in that like traditional talk therapy, you're mostly just talking about what you're feeling or thinking or experiencing. But in coaching, the way that I coach is that I don't really want you to tell those stories over and over and over again, because the more we get stuck in those stories, the more we attach them to our identity and who we are, and the stronger it becomes a part of who you are, the harder it is to shift that and change that. So really the goal when I am working with a coaching client is really getting down to the root cause of the problem, of what's holding them back, and then looking at all the patterns that have been developed because of that root cause of the problem, and then shifting it so that they can break that unserving pattern and create a pattern that's more serving. So like breaking the pattern of people pleasing and being able to actually have boundaries in place so that you're not being taken advantage of.
Gotcha. So there's different kind of techniques that life coaches use, just like different therapy techniques.
Yep.
Awesome. Now, you had talked about burnout, and you had said that you had kind of gotten burned out as a teacher. So I'm sure many people experience burnout, especially in today's fast-paced world. Um, how do you kind of help your clients through that?
Yeah. So, what I didn't recognize at the time for the reason I was burning out was because I was using my job to meet my emotional needs. And if my children were standing here, they'd be like, oh my God, not the emotional needs. Because most things the reason that we struggle in life is because we're trying to meet our emotional needs in an unserving way. So, and I did not create the emotional needs. These are Tony Robbins, the emotional needs that he created with a psychologist. But basically, the gist is there are six of them. And four of them, which we need, there are primary needs, and we need them like air, food, and water. And we will do whatever it takes to get these needs met. And so the four emotional needs are love and connection. They go together. And then there's significance, certainty, and uncertainty. And so we use vehicles to meet these emotional needs. And so for me, my teaching career was the vehicle that I was using to meet those 4 primary needs. But I was doing it in an unserving way. So I was overvaluing significance and certainty in my teaching career. So I was basically running myself ragged to basically feel like I mattered as a teacher, and also to have this high level of certainty. And so that meant working long hours after the school day was over, buying games and toys and snacks for my students with my own money because I taught lower income students, volunteering and signing up to be on committees and taking additional trainings and workshops and things like that. So I was not balancing life outside of teaching. It was like teaching was all consuming. And then, so then I was becoming burnout because I was missing time with my family. So like while my husband was taking my girls to the pumpkin patch, I was still home working away. Instead of saying like, no, Kim, you can take 2 hours to go to the pumpkin patch. You don't need to sit home and continue writing lesson plans and prepping materials and doing report cards and things like that. Like, give yourself the break. And I just couldn't allow myself to take that break. So that was really how it led to burnout, was because I was basically trying to use my career to tell myself I mattered and that life was certain and stable.
So I imagine a lot of people do that. When you're working with somebody, how do you kind of get them out of that mindset?
Yeah, so there is something called an emotional needs chart, which is a really great visual that I use to help them see. So the other 2 needs are fulfillment needs, and their growth and contribution. And we will not do whatever it takes to grow and contribute. We will do whatever it takes, though, for those first 4. And so when you see on this emotional needs chart, you rate it on a scale from 0 to 10. And so on my chart, I actually was meeting my fulfillment needs with my teaching career. I just couldn't see it because it didn't feel like I was meeting those needs on a high level. But I was 10s across the board for those first 4 needs. And so having that visual is really like kind of eye-opening, like, whoa, I see it now. To where I am overvaluing these 4 needs and I'm not allowing myself to grow or contribute. Having that visual sometimes can be super key to getting them to have the light bulb moment where it's like, oh, okay, I see it now.
Oh, interesting. So everybody's kind of chart is going to be different. It's not going to be the same chart for every person.
Right. So, because you can use the emotional needs chart for whatever vehicle. So like I have had one client who she thought that she was actually a perfectionist. But when we looked at the chart, she actually realized that it was not to her detriment, that she was actually really just more organized than a perfectionist. So that was a perspective shift for her, because then she was like, oh, okay, so actually what I'm doing is actually helping me, not hurting me. Because in her mind, she had convinced herself that her being a perfectionist was actually not a good thing.
So when you're kind of talking to people and figuring out kind of what their triggers and stuff are, I'm sure managing it can be tough, especially for the people that you're coaching. How do you kind of help them manage some of the triggers that they find?
Yeah, and so because we don't go really deep into the actual traumatic situation, for the most part, they don't. I'll say the trigger is minimal because we're taking it from like a more evidence-based approach rather than an emotional approach. And that's not to say that when I'm working with someone, they don't cry or get emotional, because they do. But we dig down to what the meaning of that situation is. So I was working with someone recently who was having some issues with her sister, with the sister being somewhat, I'll say, of a bully. That's the easiest way to put it. and she started to cry. And so, which was out of character for her. And so I said, what is causing the emotion now? And she, realized it was because she felt like she was losing her relationship with her sister. So we just talked through it a little bit, and she was able to say, okay, this isn't really about the losing my relationship with my sister. It's just recognizing that I've allowed my boundaries to be crossed. And then she was able to shift out of that, I'll say, intense emotional place, because she was able to see the situation more clearly for what it was, rather than thinking that the relationship was ending. It's just that it was a touch out of alignment.
Now, I know that there's a couple different things that you definitely talk about, and I know that self-care and self-love are topics that you often speak about. So what does self-care kind of look like?
Yeah, I think it looks different for everybody, but it goes back to those emotional needs. So I think the reason people get hung up too is because oftentimes we're looking for other people to meet our needs for us. And that puts us in a position to where we create expectations, and then we expect someone to do something and it doesn't happen. And then that feels bad. It feels wrong. It feels like you're not cared about. So I always say, if you can learn to meet your needs for yourself, and then other people meet them for you, it's the added bonus when other people do it for you. But if you can meet your emotional needs for yourself, then you're not reliant on someone else to do it. You can do it more consistently, and you can do it in a way that feels right for you, rather than just taking what comes along. So learning how to make yourself feel significant. Um, for some people, it's like treating themselves to a cup of Starbucks every morning on their way to work. That makes them feel like they matter. Other people, like for me personally, it's going to get my nails done. If I, make time to go get my nails done, I feel like it's a great day. So really just figuring out, and this is where it kind of takes some introspection to figure out what is it that you can do for yourself to make yourself feel cared for and to make yourself feel loved. Because I think oftentimes when we're looking for other people to do those things for us, it takes our power away, and we're giving our power away to others. But when we can do it for ourselves, we get to keep that power, and then we can say like, oh, how kind of someone, oh my gosh, what a pleasant surprise. But you're not reliant on others to do it for you. So it's really like, it's not a one size fits all recipe. And because some people value significance more than they value love and connection with others. Some people would rather have connection with others, and that's what makes them feel significant. So it's really about figuring out what lights you up, and then allowing yourself to have those opportunities, or to do those things, or to treat yourself to whatever it may be. But really figuring out what it is that you can do for yourself, rather than waiting for someone else to do it for you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Especially when you think about self-care and, kind of self-love to yourself, it really feels good when you value yourself.
Yeah. And I think, self care is, again, one of those buzzwords. And I think there's so much out there that like self care has to look a certain way, it has to be a certain way. Oh, if you're, doing self care, you're looking in the mirror and saying affirmations every morning. But like for me to do that would feel silly and not helpful. So it's like that's where you really have to sort of cut through the noise and figure out what's going to work for you, and be willing to say like, oh, okay, I tried this thing. Like, oh, I tried the affirmations, because trust me, I have. I've tried looking in the mirror and saying the affirmations, and that doesn't really feel like anything for me. But there are other people who I know who look in the mirror and they say their affirmations, and that makes them feel like they're on top of the world. So if you try something a few times and it doesn't feel quite right, don't feel like it's a fail or you're a failure. Just know that that's not your thing, and it's okay to look for something else.
Every person's kind of different, so it makes sense that not every person is going to do the same thing to help with what they feel is right. Um, there's lots of different things, and people do different things, so it makes sense.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we get stuck in this trap of like, oh, well, it worked for so and so, so it has to work for me. Or, oh, I see that, social media influencer doing X, Y, and Z, so that has to be the thing. And sometimes we fall into the trap of doing what's trendy rather than what feels right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially with social media out there now. Everybody turns to it to find the solution for everything.
For me, it wasn't really social media. It was like podcasts and self-help books. That was that was where I turned for the answers, not so much social media. But I know now, now that TikTok is back, a lot of people are relieved because they were not sure what they were going to do without their TikTok to look for the answers on TikTok.
Now I assume as you kind of like as you're working, like as somebody's working with you and you're kind of walking them through steps to kind of help, I imagine that you kind of give them some directions on what they could do. And just like we kind of talked about, every person is not the same. But I'm assuming you could take multiple things from what you've said and kind of combine them together, and it may make something that works for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so, like, so journaling is a big thing. It can be really helpful. And so there was actually a point in my journey where I was like, journaling is a waste of time. Like, I'm all done with the journal. Burn, journal, burn. I never want to see another journal in my life. But it can be very helpful a lot of times because it allows us to get our thoughts out of our head and onto paper so that we can detach from them some. So oftentimes, every client I have, I encourage them to keep a journal. Now, what I encourage them to journal on is different because their journeys are not the same. So like journaling is key. But I have like one client who is completely opposed to anything holistic, does not want Reiki, does not want crystals, does not want to even look at an oracle card. So I know for that client, we don't even talk about those things. She's content to have her journal and that's it. That's where the buck stops. But then I have another client who is very open to meditation. So she's willing to meditate. She's willing to do EFT tapping in addition to her journaling. And she's not incredibly I'm going to say not incredibly woo in that she doesn't know much about holistic stuff, but she's open to learning. So like now she has a rose quartz necklace. Rose quartz is all about self-love. And when she's feeling like she needs a little extra boost of self-love, she wears her rose quartz necklace. So that's the beauty in the work that I do is that I can tailor it to whatever the person is open to and where they are on their journey.
Oh, that's awesome. So even if they're not into a lot of the holistic things, there's still ways that you can work with them.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Because not everybody is open to the holistic stuff. And yes, it's nice to have a combination of the two, but you can get just as much benefit from just coaching in and of itself without putting in the other holistic components.
Oh, that's neat. I also know that you really promote resilience. Why is that?
Well, because that's what's going to be resilience is the thing that's going to help you pick yourself up by your bootstraps and keep on going. Because there have been so many things that have happened in my life where if I wasn't resilient, I probably wouldn't be here today. I would have just, crawled onto the couch and never gotten up. And just and then that was it, like become a blob. And some people, it's really hard for them to be resilient because they don't have the coping skills to cope with whatever the situation is in the moment. It's all consuming for them. So I have a cousin who I would say really struggles with resiliency because she is not able to see the things that she's experienced in life and take the lessons from them and be able to take those lessons and move on to the next day. For her, it's easier to just lay in bed all day. And that's the way that she copes. That's just not how I operate. And it's unfortunate because she's missed out on so much. She's the same age as me. I'm actually 2 weeks older than her, and I'm in my early 40s. And she has missed out on so much in life, experiences with her kids. She doesn't have a significant other anymore. They get tired of her just sleeping away every day. She's missed out on experiences with her sisters, with her mom, because she doesn't have the ability to be resilient and take the experiences that she's had and not let them define her, but instead say like, okay, this has happened to me. This is what I've gained from this. This is what I know now. I'm going to take this and I'm going to move forward. So that's where I think resiliency is so important, because it gives you the tools and the ability to keep going, so that, because we only get one shot at this life, and so that you don't miss out on other things that come your way, because you can't get out of your own way.
Yeah, you always hear the saying, you got to pick yourself back up and get back out. So uh, it makes a lot of sense that you really do need to be resilient, because just like you said, if you don't pick yourself back up, you're never going to get back out there and keep experiencing life.
Yeah, it just keeps you, I'll say, in the place of being a victim instead of a victor. So, when you stay in that victim mode, you are giving your power away to the traumatic experiences that you've had, to the people that you've had them with, who have been maybe the perpetrator of the trauma, but you aren't keeping your own power. And so in that regard, like, almost there's like this sense of helplessness there, like, well, I'm the victim, I can't do anything to change it. But that's not true. You can. It might not be easy, it might be scary, it might be hard, it might feel like it's not worth overcoming. And there are days where you think like, yeah, staying on the couch or staying in bed under the covers is definitely way better. But in the big, huge scheme of things, it's actually not.
So if you have clients that kind of don't feel resilient, they don't feel like they can get up and get back out there, what are some tips or tricks that you can help them do to kind of change that perception and actually help them start to feel like they can pick themselves up and get back out?
Yeah, I think the first part is like, and this sounds kind of jargony, but like regulating your nervous system. Like, I know that sounds like so super coach speak, but I feel like you have to be able to um, calm that fight, flight, or freeze mode in order to be able to process and think about how you want to move forward, or what it is that you want to move forward to. I think a lot of times when people feel like they can't be resilient, it's because they're stuck in that freeze mode. And that's a trauma response. That's a survival response. And so you have to be able to sort of interrupt that pattern of being in the freeze mode. And so part of that is like, the fastest way to change your emotional state is to change the physicality of that emotional state. So a lot of times, people feel like lethargic, or maybe their heart is racing, or they have a knot in their stomach, or their mouth is so dry they feel like they can't even get a word out. And so the fastest way to change your emotional state is to do it physically. So that's just breathe, or get some water, or get up and just take a walk, even if it's just walking from the couch to the kitchen to get the water. Just something so simple like moving your body can be the thing that can give you that second of clarity, so you can say like, oh, okay, I think I'm a little bit stuck right now. Now that I'm a little bit calm and I've changed the way that I'm feeling a little bit, what's one small thing I can do now? And it could even just be so small. So something so small as like changing the language around the situation. So there's a whole triangle. So like the triad of the emotional state is like the way that you physically feel, the language that you use, and then the belief that you have. And so it almost runs in like a cycle. And so really it's like interrupting that cycle. And so like when you change the physical aspect of your emotional state, then it opens up the space for you to change the language around it. And if you can change the language around it, you can start to change the beliefs that you have around it. And not to say that it's that fast and that simple. It can be much more complicated than that, but that's just like the snippet of it. So if you can change the way that your body feels, it will give you an opportunity to figure out what would be the next best thing. And that could be meditation, that could be journaling, that could be doing some EFT tapping, it could be talking to someone. So that's like the, I'll say the easy, quote unquote, easy way to approach it.
Okay. Yeah, and um everything that you said, it makes a lot of sense why you really need that I can't say the word now.
That's okay.
Resiliency in in your life. It really does make a lot of sense. From everything that you said, just because if you don't have it, then you're not you may not even have the will to even try to, fix any issues that you have or just move on and continue living life.
Yeah.
In your experience, in all your experiences, what's the most common obstacle that people have when they're trying to kind of heal from different issues?
A lot of times people just feel stuck. Um, so they're stuck in some way, shape, or form. So they're stuck feeling like they're bitter and angry, or they're stuck because they feel helpless. But they just have like this stuck feeling, and they don't know where to go from there. Um, so I have two new clients and they both feel stuck. One feels stuck because she's been in years of therapy and she's recognizing that she feels like it's not working. And she's really not sure, she just wasn't sure what to do. And so she's also feeling stuck professionally. She's feeling stuck in a romantic relationship. She's just feeling stuck across the board. Another client that I have that's a newer client also feels stuck. Similar situation, has tried therapy, has tried hypnotherapy, and just feels like she doesn't even know where to go from here because she just feels stuck. And she feels like there isn't much, she just doesn't have the bandwidth for much more in life. So that's generally what it is. They just feel stuck, but they're not really sure how to get unstuck.
That makes sense because a lot of people that you talk to, just in conversations, a lot of times they say they feel stuck.
Yeah. And sometimes it's stuck on like an emotional roller coaster. So they just feel like they're an emotional mess. Like 1 minute they're happy and the next minute they're sad and then they're angry and then they're back to feeling happy and then they're angry and they're like, I just can't make this crazy ride stop. So the stuck feeling presents itself in many different ways.
What's your perspective on external validation? Do you think it's important?
Um, that's a loaded question. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, we all want external validation. It's human nature to want to feel like we're seen and we're heard and we're approved of by, whatever group of people we're with, whether it's our family or our friends or our coworkers. But I think it treads a slippery slope when that's our main source of validation. Because again, it's setting you up to have expectations of when you should be validated by others and what that validation should look like. And again, you're giving your power away. So I always say if you can validate yourself, which goes back to those emotional needs, that's like the true win. And then if you get validation from others, that's also the added bonus, because you're not reliant on it and you don't feel like you don't get stuck in that trap. And so when we're reliant on the validation of others, sometimes it causes us to be an overachiever. It causes us to be a people pleaser. It causes us to take on that martyr complex. And then we people please and we overachieve and we are, the martyr, and we're waiting for someone to say, great job. Oh my God, you're amazing, or you're so smart, or you're so beautiful, or you're so caring or kind, or whatever the case is. And it doesn't come. And then we get bitter and angry and we think, WTF, I just did X, Y, and Z for you. And you didn't even tell me how amazing I was. That's it. I'm never doing that for someone again. And then lo and behold, there we are, people pleasing again, because we're like, this time I'm going to get that validation. This time someone's going to tell me how amazing I am. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. So I think when that's our sole source of validation, it can set a lot of people up for disappointment, and heartache. And then it causes us to feel alone and isolated and misunderstood.
Yeah, you really have to feel good about yourself, I feel like. And then you can start kind of assessing what other people think about you or
Yeah, I think if you don't feel, and I think it's a kind of a double-edged sword. I think oftentimes we get into this people pleaser mode or this overachiever mode or the martyr complex or whatever other patterns that are out there. I think we get into those places because we don't feel good about ourselves, and we've been taught at some point in life that you, in order to be loved or accepted or validated, you have to make other people happy, or you have to be the best athlete or the best student or the best employee or the best whatever. um and so we always have this underlying feeling like of being deficient or not enough when we're not doing those things, when we're not being a people pleaser, or we're not being an overachiever, because we've been told like you have to be those things in order to be someone or something. And so I think we get stuck um, in those places when we don't feel good about ourselves, and we're doing them to feel better about ourselves, because we think like, oh, if someone tells me I'm so amazing, then I'll feel complete, then I'll feel whole, then I'll feel valued or worthy or accepted or loved or whatever, whatever it is that they're looking for. um but oftentimes when they do get it, it's short-lived, or it's not in the way that they were expecting. So then it reinforces that belief that there is something not quite right about them.
yeah. For somebody that's just kind of starting out on the road to maybe getting a life coach or finding a life coach, what are some steps that they can kind of do to kind of find somebody or just kind of start healing?
Yeah, so I think the first step is that you have to find someone that you're going to connect with. And I will say that just like not all therapists are created equal, not all life coaches are created equal. So the downfall is that anyone can say that they're a life coach, especially because of platforms where it's like, get your life coaching certification for $15.99. So I would say if you're going to make sure that you are having a conversation with them. If you feel like they're just giving you surface level things, and strategies like, oh, just say 5 affirmations a day, chances are that's probably not a life coach that's going to get you the lasting result that you're looking for. You're going to want someone who can get to the root cause of the patterns that you're running. First, they're going to have to be able to identify the patterns that you're running, and they're going to have to be able to get to the real reason that you're running them. And they're going to have to be able to help you shift those patterns into something more serving. So if you have the conversation with someone and it feels too good to be true, or you feel like you're being gaslit a little bit into signing up with them, I would say run in the opposite direction. And I will give you a real life example. So earlier in my healing journey, I knew of neuro-linguistic programming, and I thought, oh, that's it. That's the missing piece of the puzzle, is the neuro-linguistic programming. And I came across a practitioner at a Mind Body Spirit Fest, and really liked her vibe when I talked to her at the festival. And then we had a phone conversation, and I, ugly face cried on the phone, and she was like, I'm going to meditate on the approach I take to help you. That should have been red flag number one, that she had to meditate. Like, I have a protocol that I follow for every client that I work with. I don't have to meditate on anything. Like I have a protocol and I can tailor it to the need of each client based on the situation that they're experiencing and what they're working through. But there is no meditation on anything. So if they do not have a set protocol, the answer should be no, thank you. So she was like, well, I'll meditate on it. And then we had a conversation a couple days later, and she was like, it's going to be a 6-month program and $10,000. And I was like, oh, well, that's 1 year of tuition for one of my children. So I could not allow myself to spend $10,000 on life coaching because it should never cost $10,000 to work with a life coach. Now, if you want to get certified to be a life coach, yes, it can cost up to $10,000. However, to be a client, you should never be paying anyone $10,000. And so I was like, oh, I don't have $10,000 for life coaching. And she was like, well, you're not going to give yourself this opportunity to heal? And I was like, yeah, because what if this doesn't work? And then I've just wasted $10,000 of my child's private school tuition. Like I could not allow myself to say yes to that. And she was not letting me hang up the phone. And I finally was like, I have to leave to get my kid from school. Like I have to go. Like I have to go. And then she kept messaging me on Facebook with like these quotes. And she was like, I see the beauty in your soul. And it would be such a shame if you didn't allow your true beauty to shine and things like that. And this went on for like over a month. And then she finally got the message that like the answer really was no. So if like someone is not taking no for an answer from you and they're gaslighting you into thinking that it's your only solution to being quote unquote fixed, that also should be a red flag. So don't spend $10,000. If they have to meditate on it and they don't have a prescribed protocol, also probably not a good idea. And if they keep messaging you after the fact with quotes and things, also probably a red flag. So like trust your gut. When you have the right person, you'll know because you will feel it in your gut. It will feel like a heck yes. You will not have a glimmer of doubt. And maybe you might feel a little bit of doubt because it's uncertain. It's something new. You've not worked with a life coach before, but you'll know the difference between like a heck no, this is definitely not the right fit, and like, oh my gosh, I'm a little bit nervous because this is a new thing that I'm about to do for myself.
I like how you put it. Trust your gut, and if it feels too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how would you define success?
So that's a really great question. I think success, so for me, success is really letting go of the worry of what other people are going to think about you. Because I will say that I feel like on some level, my life has not taken a traditional path. Like, yes, I'm married and I've been married to my husband since 2008. We've been together for 20 years. I have 2 beautiful daughters. I have a beautiful home, 2 dogs and the cat. Like, yes, like that kind of like stereotypical, like life is good scenario. But like I literally threw my teaching career to the wind. And now I do something that's more unconventional with coaching and holistic healing. And I know that there are people in my close inner circle who think, wow, like that's probably not the wisest choice on your part. I've been told in the past, like, you're wasting your college degrees. But like letting go of that narrative of what other people think that your life should look like, I think is the true definition of success. Because while like it might look like on paper I'm wasting my college degrees, I'm actually not. Because I have the ability to use them in a way that feels more aligned with working with clients, because I do have a bachelor's in education and a master's in education. So being able to take the skills that I learned in college, I use them every day. I use them when I parent my children. I use them in my relationship with the coworkers that I have at a spa where I work. I use them so the skills are there and they're not being wasted. So I think that's like the crux of it, is that you allow yourself to live a life that feels good for you, regardless of what other people think of the choices that you're making.
Wow, what an awesome definition. So you've been on a fair amount of podcasts, I believe. What's the one takeaway that you hope people get from hearing your message?
So I think it's kind of twofold. I think it's being willing to allow yourself this space to explore what feels right for you and not being afraid to say like, okay, I tried that and it's not the thing, and not beating yourself up for that. Because I think so often we get stuck in this place of fearing change and saying to ourselves like, oh, I set out on this path, so I have to stick to it. I can't deviate from it, because if I deviate from the path, then, what am I going to think about myself, or what are other people going to think about me? They're going to think I'm a failure, or I'm going to think I'm a failure. And I think really letting go of that, like letting go of the notion of failing. I don't think anything is a fail. I think it's just an opportunity to learn and reevaluate. And that goes with, conversations that you have with friends and family and loved ones. Like, they're not always going to go right. And so it doesn't make it a fail. It doesn't make it bad. It just gives you data. It gives you information to be able to change something for the future. And I think that goes with career and relationships and just life in general. But I think the other thing too is like, we have to really embrace caring for ourselves and not look to it from others. Like, that was a big part of my journey, was I expected my husband to make me feel loved and to make me feel seen and valued and heard and all of these things. But that was like putting such a massive amount of pressure on him. And I didn't even know what I needed in that moment. So like allowing yourself to figure it out and to be able to do it for yourself. So that way you're not coming off as needy or insecure or a pest. But to be able to do it for yourself, and then to be able to receive it from others when they offer it to you. But then you can also communicate it better to them, what you need and what in the moment, instead of expecting them to guess and figure it out.
I keep hearing a reoccurring theme, and that's really starting to care about yourself. And it seems once you start caring about yourself, and once you figure out how to care about yourself, then you can start succeeding on what you set out to do. Um, and it kind of all ties back to, hey, maybe you might not succeed the first time, but keep trying and keep trying. And that's kind of where the resilience part comes in. So I can see how everything kind of ties back together and really starts with you kind of having faith in yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think a lot of times we lose that faith in ourselves because we're not taught to have it, or we try to have it and then something happens and the wind gets knocked out of our sails. So then we feel like, oh, well, that was pointless, or like, I can't rely on myself. I have to rely on someone else because I tried this thing, it didn't work. And now I don't know what to do. And so I'll just sit and wait for someone to tell me how to figure it out, or what to try, or something like that. But when we can really get in that place of doing it for ourselves, we're so much more empowered and we're so much more aware. And on some level, I feel like we're so much more alive because we're actually not going through the motions. We're actually like letting the wind blow through our hair, and like we're riding the roller coaster. We're taking the ups and downs for what they are and when they come. And if we didn't, it gets kind of boring.
Well, it has been so great to have you on today. Are there any websites or social media if anybody would like to learn more about you?
Yeah, so my website is kimkeane.com. It's KIMKEANE. And then all my social handles are at Kim V, which is my middle initial, Keane. So it's not hard to find me, because I tried to keep everything the same. So if you go one place, you're going to land on it some way, shape, or another.
Awesome. Well, once again, I really appreciate you having you on. I appreciate you being on. I have learned a tremendous a bit of new information, things that I've kind of heard of before, but have never really looked into. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I'm so glad and thankful for the opportunity to be on your show. So thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome, and I hope to have you again sometime.
Oh, I would love it.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation. Like I said, I learned a whole bunch of new stuff. So I love the interesting conversations where I actually learn.
Yeah, likewise.
Awesome. And everybody, we will see you next time. And thanks and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Conversations Ignite. See you next time.